right, Stanton. I'm with Dr. Stanton Peele, the founder of our Life Process program, which is an online program serving people who want to improve their lives, specifically around addictive involvements that they may be in. My name is Zach Rhoads, and I'm co-host of our podcast. Dr. Peele, nice to be with you.
Happy Super Bowl Sunday, which is when we're recording this, Zach.
Super Bowl Sunday. So we wanted to make sure we got somewhere in the middle of the day so we had time to go enjoy an Eagles win, maybe not you, and some good commercials. In the meantime, we've been busy on social media. You know, we try the best we can to give people value for free. We're a program that you have to pay money to join, and then again, we want, our concern is that people understand truth about things. And so, to the extent that we know what's true about addiction, and I believe that that's to a large extent, we try to share information. And once in a while, when you get busy sharing information, people have their own concerns that they like to bring to the table. And who knows where their concerns come from, if it's from any sort of research or it's from a knee jerk or an intuition. Something that's sort of like perennial when we're talking to a group of people is a distaste for the idea that people are drinking alcohol or that it could be okay for people to drink alcohol. We hear this in public messaging. We hear this from large organizations who are tasked with giving public health messaging that there's no good or safe level of alcohol. And as we'll explain later, that you a little bit subtly buried in the bodies of research that they're referring to, there are some significant findings about what it looks like for an individual who uses alcohol in a moderate way. And then, of course, there's some cultural implications of this. I'm going to just give really quickly a very charitable version, I believe, of an argument that one of the participants in our group made to us. Now, I lifted a concept of yours and made a quote about societies in which alcohol is not okay. It's like a warring bloodbath or something like that. And inside societies that drink moderately, alcohol is just a beverage. So this person relayed lots of information. Now, usually I would ignore a person like this because our group is for people who want to improve their lives. And so we just kind of stick on that topic. But it's an issue that seems to be, it comes around every so often in a heated way, but it's always there. The person's argument is this, and this is her. Alcohol-related harm is sort of systemic, not just an individual problem. This idea that there's responsible drinking, these narratives around that, well, they just serve industry interests way more than they serve public health interests. And then there's a problem with harm reduction, because I think harm reductionists may unintentionally perpetuate alcohol's cultural dominance, which is bad. And true liberation requires normalizing sobriety and to stop normalizing alcohol as a part of our, rite of passage in our culture. And then we have to critically examine society's relationship with alcohol. So this sort of a radical public health framework that's rooted in a belief that reducing alcohol's social presence, not just managing its risks, would be the most effective way to protect individuals and communities. We can go. You deserve to respond after that mouthful that I just put out.
Well, I've seen the exchange, and of course, you say, so are you saying, you say to this person, that we would be better off having prohibition?
Yeah.
And of course, we've tried that, and everybody's rejected that. We belong to the types of cultures that you're talking about that disapprove of alcohol are called temperance cultures. Harry Levine, the sociologist, coined that phrase. They're Northern European versus Southern European, and they dominate world epidemiology. So I've gotten tired of reviewing all these data. They just rush by people and they don't care because people react to this. I mean, if we ask that person what her background was, it would be temperance background. I'm almost positive. Non-temperance countries are Mediterranean, Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, Greece, and the Jewish culture, which accepts alcohol as a fundamental precept. A basic Jewish prayer that's said over a newborn baby is the blessing for wine, Bre Pri Guffin. And so these feelings are just inbred and they can't be eradicated. So I'll just review three bodies of evidence for what they're worth, but then I'm going to switch further back to you as to why you don't come from a Mediterranean culture, why these issues are important to us from the perspective of the Life Process Program, why you think it's important to put substances in their proper place.
So we have a few things going on. You're going to give a list of three here, and we're sort of talking about what is the history of alcohol in human civilization, but also more recently in temperance versus non-temperance countries. I have a bit to, I feel I should defend what we mean by harm reduction. And right, why would this all be important to us? So you go.
In the first place, there's a whole body of knowledge called alcohol archaeology. And what's been discovered is that they've identified 6 centers of civilization where humans evolved up. In every one of them, they find traces of alcohol, which is sort of obvious because fermentation's a natural process. It just happens. You can't avoid having wine in warm cultures, and distillation and with hops is almost just as simple. You know, when wheat gets wet and it dries out, you just get alcohol. It's almost as though God wanted human beings to grow up alongside of alcohol. So there's a universal historical relationship with alcohol. And one concept is to try and separate yourself from that. It seems like a bizarre process. Alcohol is a fundamental aspect of human civilization, and it always will be. That's one. Two, here, let me throw out something. I throw out this paradox constantly, and I'll make you the victim of my paradoxical statement.
Okay.
Throughout, the European Consortium on Alcohol Studies found there's an inverse correlation between alcohol, the amount of alcohol consumed in a country, and the alcohol-related harms in that country. What the hell is that? What am I saying, and how is that possible?
In other words, in countries where alcohol is consumed more, the health is better. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Right. And then places where
How is that
alcohol
possible?
and in places where alcohol is consumed more often, it's more culturally embedded and, to use a word from our thread, normalized to the extent that it's embedded in a healthy way of living. In countries that drink less, there's probably more binge drinking.
They tend to drink more binge oriented. They tend to invest more in intense drinking bouts. And for a long time, the concept was, well, possibly that's true in terms of customs, but in terms of basic physiological measures, that can't be. So a group called the European Consortium of Alcohol Studies found they divided European countries to northern, central, and southern. Northern are Scandinavian, central are like Belgium, Holland, Germany, southern is Greece, France, Italy. The level of alcohol-related mortality, which involves cirrhosis and other alcohol-related diseases, is 6 times as high in Northern European countries as Southern European countries. That's mind-boggling. Drinking wine or related mild spirits in the company of meals turns out not to be a better way to go in terms of alcohol-related problems, behavioral problems. It turns out that's the best way not to die from drinking alcohol. So, alcohol has been with us forever. It always will be with us. In Southern European countries where alcohol is more commonplace and is integrated in people's lives, alcohol related harms are far reduced. Now, the most controversial thing of all, in the late 2010s, the World Health Organization released the global burden of diseases. And that concept of there's no safe level of drinking comes from that study. Now, that's a funny way to summarize your results. Epidemiological studies usually say something like, at this level of drinking, you're more likely to live longer and to have a lower level of disability for this group of people, men versus women or certain ages. The Global Burden of Disease study didn't summarize their results that way. In fact, people who drank alcohol in the Global Burden of Disease study lived longer than lifetime abstainers. Let's jump to 2023. They focused the Global Burden of Disease study, did a total alcohol-related study over 200 nations. The level over the entire world population that they project, the level at which a lifetime abstainer is as likely to live as long as a drinker is when the drinker drinks as much as 1.7 drinks a day. Below that level, drinking, not abstaining, you'll have fewer disabilities and live longer. That's the people who say that alcohol can't be drunk safely. The main benefit from alcohol is the reduction in heart disease, which is the major killer in America and worldwide. After the age of 40, the level of drinking at which you're going to live longer than a lifetime abstainer is over 2. Stunningly, they found over the age of 60, the level of drinking at which you'll live the equivalent life in terms of longevity and disability is over 3 drinks daily. I get tired of reviewing this data because that person that you're talking to has some vision of alcohol, and I'm not going to change that. I mean, the joke I make now is, I want you to abstain. I want you not to drink alcohol. That's my hope for you. Now, I'll give one last view on this. The Surgeon General of the United States has revealed, he says that we need to label alcohol as producing cancer. Indian American.
I thought he was Indian.
And India is not an alcohol consuming country.
Right.
China is. And China does badly with opium, but India does good with opium. But let's not get into that whole mishmash.
Right.
So for him, alcohol doesn't have a cultural meaning. It doesn't hit him like, oh, what's a good, I didn't sit around with my family. If you go to Italy, in every town square, there's a church, and right across the church is a cafe. After Sunday morning Catholic services, the whole family repairs to a cafe where everybody drinks wine, including the children drinking wine and water dilution. Alcohol has a different meaning to people in these different cultures, and you can't convert people to your meaning. There's just no way of doing that. And so it happens to be that who is controlled by temperance culture, English-speaking Nordic nations, it's almost like they've been pursuing a policy of saying bad things about alcohol. A strange thing has happened around, I find, the Surgeon General saying label alcohol for causing cancer. There's been, to me, a surprising backlash in organs like Medscape and the New York Times, which often publish anti-alcohol, no safe level things by people saying sort of what we're saying, which is, after all, common sense. Wait a second. You can't label alcohol as being harmful in some global overall way without taking regard of the individual and the culture that they're a part of. A remarkable range of people have kind of uttered that. Now, why are they uttering that? Because it's obvious. I mean, all of us know people, and a large number of us drink alcohol in a moderate, safe, beneficial way. And here is the epidemic. I was going to say three things. Here's the strange epidemiological thing that European slant is reflected within the United States. Better off people in America, higher income, higher education, are more likely to drink alcohol, but are less likely to experience alcohol related harms. Now, that's all. You're not almost allowed to say things like that. It sort of sounds
Right.
discriminatory.
Right. Let's leave that out.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
But ironically, I know a ton of epidemiological researchers. They all drink alcohol. And one that I know well is Tim Stockwell, who's the main person who says all that stuff about alcohol being beneficial is wrong. And I've drunk alcohol with Tim Stockwell in Europe, the United States, and Canada. It's almost like Tim Stockwell is going, you peons can't drink alcohol. I can.
Right. Something's going on. Either everyone who's rich and knows better is masochistic, or they're that they can do it, but you can't.
And his argument, he's the person that's most published about this, is that it appears in some studies, quite a few studies, that alcohol is beneficial because people under better social circumstances are the people who are mainly drinking it. So, okay, let's accept that logic. The reasons to question it, but let's accept that logic. Why is it that better off, wealthier, better educated people choose to drink alcohol, and possibly as a consequence of the overall gestalt of their lives, well, they live longer. At a minimum, it says, well, alcohol is not exactly a lethal dose poison, is it? They're still living longer. And maybe, okay, it's all the healthy things, the diets, the wealth, the education that allows them to live longer. But isn't it funny that the most privileged people choose to drink alcohol and it fits within a healthy, prosperous lifestyle?
Right.
Isn't there?
You've now separated. You've like granted the argument. It will kill most people, but if someone has such an enriching life that they're drinking, maybe it's not killing them as slowly. You're saying, all right, yeah, let's even say that's all true. Yet that is part of their lifestyle. They are choosing to do it. Why in that milieu are people choosing to drink? What's fitting in so well socially, culturally?
People live longer.
Right.
So, okay, I've gotten tired of making that argument. Um, and I'm going to switch a little bit back to you because I'm 79 years old. I drink alcohol, and I have a PhD. I fit in it, and I'm Jewish, so I fit in all these slots. You know what I mean? I come from a Mediterranean type culture where alcohol is consumed normally. I'm a highly educated person who tends to drink higher grade alcohol in a very moderate way as a part of an overall lifestyle. So I'm a thing. Um, People can judge for themselves whether I'm healthy or whether I'm cognitively impaired, but I'm more or less doing pretty well. health wise and cognitively. And I'm content to do that. And if people don't want to do that, God bless them. I'm just going to continue doing that. But I've switched my interest in life now. As you know, you and I are working. We work with individuals. We don't, in Love Process Program, we don't tell people to drink moderately. They come to us. Here, you take that part from there.
This claim here, I felt it worthy of attention because of what you're asking me. I guess the solution from this person, but this is not an attack on this person. I hear this a lot, is that we really need to do something to influence culture so that they understand that alcohol is really not necessary. And for me, that doesn't mean anything to me because I don't know. We don't tell people anything's necessary. Now, to your question, we're kind of two different ways. We have an educational arm of what we do, and we meet people face to face as clients. So, and in education, we'll tell people what we know to be true based on research, based on culture, based on what we can see empirically. When people come to us, we don't have there's no ante to being part of our program. We don't say you must stop drinking, and we don't say you must start drinking. We don't, to somebody who decides drinking has really been an imposition in my life, we'll say, tell us about it. So the questions that we're asking, I think, are more interesting than drinking or no drinking. It's what's your life like? And then we can help people figure out where drinking was a part of their life, for what reasons. Like if you ask me, I think you did earlier, I don't have a good answer for you. I feel good when I drink. I'm around people who drink often. I've made the mistake of drinking so much that I don't feel good. So I drink enough that I feel well, and it's a social lubricant for me. It's a cultural ritual for me. But I drink only the amount that makes me feel well, and then I stop. You know what I mean? So that's me. That's an interesting question to ask about drinking.
Now, when we have a client, one of the things that harm reduction used to mean something called controlled drinking.
Right.
You want to take that from there?
Well, right. People, we still get questions from people. Are you involved with? Are you part of moderation management or controlled drink? Right. So when we say we are harm reduction, we mean something different than let's control your drinking. It's not a numbers game for us. It's a lifestyle. We're more existential than that. Is that what you mean? So harm
Well, I
reduction.
want to back up one bit. If somebody comes with a drinking problem, we don't tell them, oh, you should moderate or you should quit.
I see what you're saying. So like I took a step ahead. Right. Well, someone might come drinking a certain amount a day and they say they have a drinking problem. Right. Our questions to them are like, what's your life like? Where you'd say there's a problem. Tell me about the problems. Tell me to the extent that your life is interesting and good, and how would you like to improve? So
and we don't
you can
tell them
leave,
whether to abstain or to moderate.
right. You can leave the call not having had an answer about how many drinks you're going to have that day, and that is actually a logical, evidence-based way of speaking to people and helping them make change in their lives with their own agency, is not to actually impose a directive on them. Yeah.
Because when people choose their own goals, and there is research that shows that, they do better at it.
Right.
And there's studies which say, would you think you'll do better abstaining or will you do better moderating? And people do, by their belief system, they do better with those goals. There's actual research on that. It's called subjective alcohol dependence versus objective.
Well, along the way, I've had clients who say, my goal is I want to abstain from alcohol for a year, say, and that is not that's not one single actionable thing. So I'm not as interested in that question as what are you going to do today? And one reason is because, you say I'm going to be alcohol free for a year and you've gone 60 days, and then on the 61st day you take a drink, you've failed your goal. And that's the mindset that someone will be in. Whereas think about things more broadly, well, and more specifically in some cases, but more broadly about life. Like, what is the reason you would want to have a better relationship with alcohol? What does that look like today? What's it look like tomorrow? And let's come up with how you'll see yourself spending a day in a year or two or three from now. But that doesn't mean let's set this numbers goal at the end of a timeline and let's see whether you can do it or not. Because at the end of the day, people will change their minds about the way they want to live because they're developing as humans all do. So the idea that we have to say to culture, hey, culture, we have to say to society, um, we need to let's do this differently. You shouldn't celebrate having drinks of wine with dinner. You shouldn't really require any alcohol at all. You should stop liking that. Well, we know that doesn't work at an individual level, and for certain, uh, you or I, we're not going to change that, change our society into a fully temperance society ever. And I just don't think that's the way it works. Society or human beings work.
As a, and most people don't enter therapy for anything, and people are always complaining, oh, people with alcohol related problems don't seek therapy. The life process program is a way of harnessing the natural process of recovery. We don't sit around lamenting that more people aren't in treatment, are being forced into treatment. And overall, people reduce their drinking with age and become more moderate drinkers. And you'll find individuals like that. They'll say, oh, I used to drink like a madman in college, but then I got married and then I got a job. And then you'll find people who will, I know people, many people, who entered recovery and became sober. And then somewhere along the line, they said, can I really not drink anymore? And of course, AA says if you do that, you're going to fall off the wagon and go crazy. A large number of people come to some point in their lives and they say, I'm just not going to drink that way anymore. I don't think I am. I'm going to give it a shot. And lo and behold, they've evolved into becoming a moderate drinker, which
Mm.
most of our treatment tells them they can't. What we do, I think what you're discussing is we don't like get people getting locked into an abstinence model where they then, if they, it's called the abstinence violation effect. Alan Marlatt called it that. They go, oh my God, I was supposed to not drink at all. Now I'm drinking. I'm a lost cause. Relapse prevention is a way of saying, calm down. Even if you've done something that you didn't want to do, you're still able to employ all of the methods of control and all the things that we've learned to prevent this from getting out of hand, either on this individual occasion or for an extended period of time. You're not going to go back to being an alcoholic.
No, and moderation's not a therapeutic model, it's a lifestyle. And so whereas you might get stuck in a situation and say, God, I want to drink, but I'll fail. I want to drink, but I'll fail. You don't enter a situation as a person who does things with moderation, saying, I don't feel like drinking, but geez, I have to. I'm like a moderate drinker. There's no more there's no more telltale sign of a person with a lifestyle of moderation and balance than who says, I don't feel like drinking, so I won't. I mean, that probably the drinking part doesn't even enter their mind. If your life is like that, you probably just think, I want what I want. I don't want what I don't want.
And that's why, in a way, people are saying, well, it's good that we have dry January because people are becoming more mindful about drinking.
Right.
You're almost saying the opposite. You're almost saying when people's lives are going well, there have been studies of Jewish ethnicity. Uh, uh, Glassner and Berg were two guys who studied in Syracuse. And Jews said, well, I'll go to a party, and if I feel like drinking, I might have a drink. And if I go to a party, if I don't feel like having a drink, I won't have a drink. They don't have a philosophy They have a gut feeling about what's good for them. Let's go back to that rich person, poor person drinking thing. You and I, of course, we're going to say rich people aren't better than poor people. So why do they drink in a healthier, more moderate way? Well, they have more going on in their lives. When they drink a higher, they don't drink cheap swill, they drink better alcohol. Their life supports a more moderate lifestyle. They probably, if they have a higher earning occupation, it requires them to be more present during most of their lives. That doesn't mean they're, of course, aren't wealthy alcoholics. Forget that. But overall, they're in a people do best when the water they're swimming in is carrying them in the right direction.
Well said.
And if you're in a place where the people you know drink moderately, you've got an evolved life, you're health oriented, you're not going to smoke, then those are things that make you more likely to be a moderate drinker. And do you want to extend this overall into the whole concept of harm reduction? I mean, harm reduction, when people say harm reduction, they tend to think drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, harm reduction, what it means to us, it's sort of like a movement and a concept. Maya Solovitz wrote a great book about the harm reduction movement and how it got its place. To us, it really only means that we're not going to tell you to get off the street. We're not going to tell you to stop injecting a drug. We're not going to tell you to do anything. We're simply a corner of the world where you can go and articulate what you think it would look like for you to do better, or articulate what you think your life looks like now, and we accept it. We don't say you should stay depressingly here in this space forever, but we say thank you for telling us. And with that articulating of a person's life space, first the conversation at the onset is a step towards betterment, because why would you be discussing what you believe to be a problem about your life with anybody, or trying to make a step to doing better, if you didn't want to improve? So we don't say hurry up and do more of that improving, because that makes you feel like, okay, I don't have a corner of the world where I can go and just like think. We say, whatever you're up to, let's explore your life. You just made a move to improve your life. I bet you, and that was small, but I bet you there are other small moves you could make to improve your life. Tell me about what that might look like for you. So harm reduction to us just means being accepting of human beings in their given lifestyle. We don't accept harming others. We don't accept people necessarily harming themselves in a moral way, but we accept that it is reality. So we embrace the fact that it happens. So with the idea of, let's convince people that that moderation is only a stepping stone to a better place, where we recognize that alcohol is not necessary and probably you shouldn't drink it. That's that idea is such a farce to us, because we say
Yes, backwards.
it's already happening. So what are you going to do? We accept reality.
Now we've moved into dealing with marginalized communities, which means homeless, native and indigenous communities. And we work with people who are working with these populations. And there's a certain logic that says, well, let's bring in therapy and let's test them to make sure they're not using drugs. We do better with people who work with marginalized populations than we do with treatment people. Because people who deal with marginalized populations they're not going to throw people out of a homeless shelter because they test positive, or they're not going to throw them out of an indigenous community because they test positive. That's totally the wrong way around. They're thinking, how can we help these people deal in a more constructive, functional way with their lives. That's our primary focus. And we anticipate, we believe that along with that, they'll dial back, there'll be less population wide addictive behavior, and individually they'll dial back their own drinking or drug use.
And what do you do with this? I mean, someone will go into apoplexy understanding that this exists, but we went into wet housing. They have a much more culturally and politically appropriate name for that in Ottawa, but you know what I mean. Places that people are poured drinks at a certain time increment, and they stay on that time increment. They don't bring their own drinks into this facility, and they stay there for as long as they'd like, as long as they're operating under the rules of that place. And most of the people who are in this establishment in or this building in inner city Ottawa, when our business partner Dahi and I walked in there, they most of them are unhoused. Otherwise, a lot of them are older, and the information that we got was that these were people who were drinking very destructively and living on the streets and in poor health. Now they're in this facility, and I've seen one before. Um, Dahi was thinking, geez, this reminds me, this has the energy of like a waiting room. You're waiting for the doctor to come out. And no one's really talking to each other and making eye contact. And it was like that. And we were told that many of those people were in such poor health before they got there, they probably would spend the rest of their lives in this facility and then an associated one where they'll sleep and have warm meals. So, what do you do when a person's at the end of their life and they still decide drinking's good, but they would rather do it in a way that is monitored and safer and more comfortable than doing it in excess on the streets? I mean, do we tell them you really shouldn't be drinking, dude? Or do we say this could be the best that a person can do, and if that's true, so be it. And God, who knows, maybe sometime people will get sick of the waiting room mentality and decide to do something even better to improve their lives.
I didn't know that you part of your exploration dealt with wet housing. Another version of wet housing is that you let people drink on their own in the housing, but they still have to follow the house rules. They
Right.
can't beat people up or throw up in the living room. And when they take people off the street, Alan Marlatt studied this in Washington. When they give them a safe place to live and allow them to drink, they drink substantially less,
Right.
which is kind of logical because you're not out in the street. When you're out in the street and you have a bottle, you have to finish a bottle. There's no such thing as saving it for later. So that people don't become social wine drinkers like, at some ritzy hotel, but they do reduce and moderate their own drinking because their lives are better, because they're respected, and because they see themselves in a new light. And in a way, that's the embodiment of harm reduction. We're saying if you do all those things, starting with giving people housing, in general, their self image, their self control, and their health behaviors are going to improve. Wet housing is an early on demonstration of harm reduction which is especially relevant to populations with the highest risk residents.
Now, there's a book behind you and behind me that we put together called "Outgrowing Addiction," with common sense instead of disease therapy. And in that book, the through line is that by and large, people who try drugs, people who try alcohol, they don't really get addicted to it. They kind of do it and move on. Okay, people who do become addicted or they have impairments in their life because of their use of drugs or alcohol, they tend to outgrow it. And like you don't do anything to them. They encounter life and like my favorite quote, well, I had shit to do. For all sorts of reasons, people choose activities and involvements that usurp the object of their addictive involvement. And then that leaves you with a number of people. It's a minority, But all of the people who ever try drugs or alcohol is a big number. So the minority of a large number is still a big number. And that those are often the people that we're tasked at helping. Um, for those people, uh, everything that we have said about harm reduction, let's let it apply. For people who do get into problems with drugs and alcohol, let's stick with alcohol. I mean, I work with young people, and so that means I work with teens, and which means I work with people who are doing some experimentation. And in so, I've noticed, and research bears this out, that by having a temperance attitude towards alcohol and that being their upbringing, then when they're faced with the decision about whether to or whether not to try a drug or alcohol, it's they've been corrupted into thinking what they're doing upon the first sip is a bad thing to do. I've noticed that people do it things in secrecy. And when they do things in secrecy, you mentioned people swim better when the water is carrying you the place you want to go. Well, the water that they're swimming in that moment is polluted with people who are also doing things in secrecy, who all believe they're doing something bad and have to reduce dissonance. That is lays out a beautiful path for unhealthy binge drinking. The good news is that probably most of those people I'm talking about will grow up and get better habits. The bad news is that that rule applies only if people live long enough to do that. So living is a necessary part of the equation of outgrowing something. And I'm always worried that an abstinence mindset being instilled in young human beings is actually leading them to, once faced with a decision to do what people in culture do, they're doing it underground and they're making unhealthy choices, and that leads to more fatalities than it would if things were above board, being done culturally and necessarily being able to help people with their values, how to drink the right way, how to drink the wrong way. That that argument I would be okay with, rather than saying we should teach people that alcohol is not necessary. I would say it'd be great to teach people that alcohol is ubiquitous, and once you come into contact with it, there's a way to do it. And don't be a schlub. Don't drink it like an idiot, but drink it appropriately, even if the your age doesn't quite cut the mustard.
And so, of course, the problem we have now is there's a omen put on people who would have give their children alcohol, when in fact the most successful cultural implementation of that is that you learn to drink from your parents.
Right.
Because the alternative model is 90% of people in America at some point drink alcohol. The question you might then ask is, well, when are they going to do that? And if the answer to that question is when they go to college or when they go into the military service, that's not a good model for any kinds of consumption. And so let's switch back to our work, either with individual clients or with marginalized communities. We're trying to backfill their failure to have a substantial life structure within which any substance use they do, which they're unlikely to quit entirely, that's just not the way life works, is going to fill a more subservient role. And for us, harm reduction is creating that superstructure, that life structure that allows them to use the substance in a more minor way. Let's switch back to the person that you're arguing with online. What do they envision? Do they envision? Well, the first thing I'd say to them, here's the questions I would say to them: what's your cultural background?
Hmm.
Um, did you know people? Did your family or did the culture or the community you grew up in drink alcohol moderately? Have you seen that be a positive experience? Um, if not, have you always viewed alcohol in a negative fashion? Um, did you yourself never have a drink ever in your whole life? If you have a child, are you going to say, here's my lesson to you? I want you to never, ever drink alcohol or consume any substance in your entire life. Does that make sense to you as a way of arming a person for life in the world that we live in right now? So I would ask all of these kinds of questions, and I would say, really, take a step back and tell me, what do you think a more sensible approach is as an overall cultural model, including raising children, for how they're going to deal with the world that we happen to be in?
Mm. I told this person I think I'd like to do a podcast about this conversation, and I told the person, not because you like where I'm not hyper focused on you. People think this way, and we come across this, so it's I knew you'd be sick of having it, so thanks for doing it. I'm getting sick of having it because there's only so much you can change a worldview in a soundbite. But if I'm super super charitable, I think her thinking is she would like to be in a I don't know that she has a solution, but she would like to live in a world where rather than people grabbing for alcohol or an out, they could face life more consciously and directly and know that yes, alcohol exists, but that's not a you don't need it in order to get by in the world. Now we you addressed this at the onset. It's like you kind of can't tell a culture what they need or don't need when it's embedded in the culture. But I think that's where she's coming from, and it makes me think of when I work at a school. A lot of times, people don't like this sometimes, but I have an office. It's a large room, and there will be a kid who's doing something explosive, and I've never seen the kid before, and I invite them in, and God forbid, but I'm letting them explore my room and play in my room. Now, what people, no matter how many times I've done this, I square it at the end. We restore, we repair, we start over, we think about a better way forward. But people hate the idea that a kid has done something destructive, and then they come in and they're playing. Like, why would you be nice to this guy? He just ripped the classroom apart, and it's because there really is a model for it, and that's how I talk to people. I think in the same vein, uh, she's thinking if people get the idea that alcohol is just a part of things, then they might think that they need it. You know, they might if you're going to say this stuff, it's dangerous, and so they're going to think you're just saying make sure to drink some wine. But I just rest assured that we are not telling people what to do or what not to do. We may make observations about what is healthy based on research and data, and common sense. We may make observations about what is healthy or not healthy, but we will never tell a person that they have to or have to stop doing anything because we're in the business of helping people move forward.
When we deal with when people call into the life process program, or when we deal with a marginalized community, any substance problems they had before we talk to them at all. We're I don't want to say we're the cleanup committee, but we're dealing with the residue of something that's already hasn't worked.
Right. We didn't make that do that.
We haven't told any of them, oh, you should try, fentanyl.
I didn't make the kid throw the chair in their classroom. And so I'm inviting them in and doing the process I do every time. We didn't tell someone go do fentanyl or get it off the street or don't test it. They're doing that already and asking for some help.
So they can't pin that on us.
Right.
You can tell that other person that. Right. Well, all right, Zach, I think we've covered a lot: the therapy, dealing with marginalized community, culture, individual meaning, social differences. As a bottom line, I think where you begin your conversation with this person is alcohol, drugs, and substances are never going away.
They're here. Yeah. Yep.
We need a concept as a culture and as individuals for dealing with all of them. You're unarmed for modern society if you don't have that.
Amen. Thank you,
Au
Stanton.
revoir.